So hello everyone. Welcome to this 11th webinar on a treatise on cosmic fire. Just by the way, from now on, we'll be meeting at 8 p.m. GMT instead of 6 p.m. I see all you got the message one way or another because you're here now. But that will go on indefinitely from now on. And that puts it in line with all the other webinar times. So all the webinars start now at 8 p.m. Okay, this webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Moray Federation webinars, then webinar series in progress as shown here. All episodes of this, the Secret Teachings of All Ages and the Secret Doctrine series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald and the webinar you wish to view. You can register for any of these webinars on the homepage of MorayFederation.com. Okay, we are currently in the third chapter on the etheric body and prana, called The Function of the Etheric Body. During our last session, we took a look at the extraordinary teaching that the fiery destruction of a root race on Earth is part of the tests by fire of a heavenly man other than our planetary logos. Also, that the fiery end of the fifth root race will take place in the second ether rather than on the dense physical plane. We then moved into the subsection called Disorders of the Etheric Body, which manifest as functional disorders affecting assimilation of prana, organic disorders affecting which affects the distribution of prana, and static disorders, which affect the ring pass knot between the etheric and the astral body. These threefold disorders affect the human kingdom, a planet, and even the solar system. A key element in all these disorders is that prana regulates the rate of vibratory action of the body through a symbiotic interaction with that body's latent heat. We then reviewed the problems inherent in the pranic triangle, both micro and macrocosmically, and ended our last session with, quote, fire always carries forward esoterically that which water has begun, which leads us to the end of the reading where we left off, which reads, much of this is hidden in the fabled story of the war between fire and water, which has its basis in the reaction of the fire latent in matter to the fire emanating outside of matter and playing upon it. So that latter is prana, or the radiatory fire. So when all is reduced to the fundamental duality of fire and water, these two become metaphors for spirit and matter, which together make up the manifested universe. Their combination produces consciousness, which as it evolves, moves ever towards the inner fiery nature, hence the statement, fire always carries forward that which water has begun. Let's take a look at MDR's comments on this statement. Can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, and Veronica.
Hello.
Hi, Anne Veronica. Could you read for us, please?
Yes. The fire latent in matter is more closely related to water and moisture. Then the radiatory fires emanating outside of matter and playing upon it. We know that both moisture and sun, water and fire are necessary for the flourishing of vegetative life, affecting, of course, animal life. The maladjustment between solar radiation and the moisture/water symbolically ruled by the moon contributes to conditions of insufficient fertility and perhaps to the excessive fertility of the jungle.
Thank you, Aunt Veronica.
Francis, may I say something?
Always.
It was this simple. You had the previous one. When the last webinar finished, I saw fire and water. And I remembered Michael Robbins said when there is in white magic that the magician stands at the point where fire and water meet. And I was thinking, where does fire and water meet in the human body? And I was thinking the brain is actually on one hand electricity, which is fire, and on the other hand it's in water, and they meet and they do things.
Yeah, you can take that up to the mental and astral planes, because the astral is, of course, associated with the watery plane, and the mental with the fiery plane, and where those meet, in a sense, is in the brain. So there is a correlation there. Interesting.
Yes, I wanted to say that.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the percentage of our body. It's very high, close to 90%, more or less, that of the body is water. So that's the nature of the substantive world. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
In the interval that has to elapse while the two fires are in process of blending, come those periods where, through karmic inheritance, reception is unstable and distribution inequable. As the point of race equilibrium is reached, so planetary equilibrium will likewise be attained. And in planetary attainment will come the equilibrium that must mutually take place between the solar planets. When they attain a mutual balance and interaction, then the system is stabilized and perfection reached. The even distribution of prana will parallel this balancing in the man, in the race, in the planet, and in the system. This is but another way of saying that uniform vibration will be achieved.
So he's opening up a vision here of what this is really all about, and at the root of this is this idea of these two fires blending. That's the first stage. So first step we have, in the interval that has to elapse while the two fires are in process of blending, come those periods where, through karmic inheritance, reception is unstable and distribution inequitable. So the two that he's talking about here refer to latent and radiatory fire. So, I want to make sure everybody understands what's going on here in terms of this. The latent fire, we've looked at these terms, but the latent fire is the fire of matter itself, and whatever form aspect is demonstrating that matter aspect. For instance, an integrated human being, it has its own latent fire, right? And that the radiatory fire is prana coming in and vivifying that system, right? And there's this very, very long period, many cycles that it takes for these two to blend into one fire. And it's in that blending that lifts the entire consciousness to a higher stage, right? Because the next blending is the blending of the fire of mind with those two fires, right? And that's this stage that he describes here as that is the goal of an entire cycle. So it's in order to understand what he's talking about here, you have to get this basic concept of what these two fires are all about. So from a macrocosmic perspective, the quote interval that has to elapse is the entire unfoldment of the planetary scheme, during which fire and water, quote unquote, spirit and matter, or more specifically, the latent and radiatory fires of matter, are blending. But in this statement, DK suggests that the blending process does not unfold evenly, that there are certain periods where the karma inherent in matter, which comes to us from a previous cycle, produced during the first solar system, prevents a full reception and assimilation of prana. And that's what's going on now. We're in this period where this is prevented. Hence the title of this section, Disorders of the Etheric Body. So what characterizes these unstable periods? DK gets us a clue in Letters on Occult Meditation. Can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, let's see. Fred, you want to read?
It always takes Fred a moment to get his mic sorted out. So, you there, Fred?
He's got good audio.
Well, go on. We can come back to Fred later.
Okay. Heike.
All
wait.
cycles are not as fundamentally important. The periods in a cycle that are of real moment are the termini, and those where overlapping and merging occur. They demonstrate on the physical plane the great revolutions, gigantic catalysms, and fundamental upheavals in all three departments of the hierarchy: the department of the world teacher, that of the head of the root race, and that of the ruler of a civilization or a force. At the points of merging in a cycle, cross currents are found, and the system seems to be in a chaotic condition. The middle part of a cycle, where the incoming vibration is stabilized and the old has passed away, manifests in a period of calm and apparent equilibrium.
Okay, so the apparent equilibrium that he's talking about here, that's of the mid-cycle. That's not the same as the true equilibrium, which DK here describes. Can we get a reader, please? Now, Fred, are you there?
Yes, I can read. I start where it says the work of evolution is to recognize, utilize, coordinate, and dominate the whole till the self, by means of these three, becomes actively aware of every form, of every vibration, and of every pulsation of the not self. Then, through the arranging power of mind, the objective of the self will be to find the truth, or that center in the circle of manifestation, which is, for the self, the center of equilibrium. Treatise on Cosmic Fire, page 199.
So in this, we have a vision of the final goal. So when these two fires, the radiatory fire and the inherent fire of matter itself, when these blend and then the further blending of the fire of mind, and then that further blending of the spirit fire happen. When this happens, then you have the condition that he describes here, right? Where every vibration and every pulsation of the not self, meaning the outer demonstration of the monad, right? Whatever vehicle that is, becomes known, right? And therefore is brought into the consciousness of the true self. And in that, we have this equilibrium, the self, the center of equilibrium. So, so often with DK, the words mean something quite different. The concept of equilibrium, balance between two things, in normal English. But here, that balance creates a state of an enlightened state where you are then able to re-identify with the self. Okay, let's see. So next, as the point of race equilibrium is reached, so planetary equilibrium will likewise be attained. And in planetary attainment will come the equilibrium that must mutually take place between the solar planets. Interesting term, solar planets. So, occultly understood, race equilibrium would seem to be, if we employ DK's definition, the blending of the latent and active fires of matter used by that race in its various sheaths, followed by emerging of the fires of mind and spirit, thus fulfilling the purpose of that race. But since the early root races on any given globe have yet to develop mind, it seems to me that true race equilibrium could only be somewhat achieved in the 5th and 6th root races, and only finally achieved in the final 7th root race on a given globe. Yet there must be some conditional equilibrium achieved in every successful root race that is then codified in the pralaya that immediately follows, thus establishing a more evolved starting point for the succeeding root race. Consider that the level of an entire scheme, race equilibrium could only truly be achieved through the complete and final development of all the races on all the globes of a scheme. DK here tells us that this culminating racial development is the means by which planetary equilibrium is achieved, which then prepares that scheme to begin merging with other quote unquote solar planets. The word solar here suggesting those planets that have achieved the status of a sacred planet and have even progressed from planetary to solar consciousness. Let's take a look at MDR's comments on this statement. Can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, before that, I think Jerry has his hand up.
Yes, Jerry.
I have a question about the fire latent in matter, and what is its relationship to Kundalini?
Yeah, it is related to Kundalini. That's the nature of the fire that rises from the base of the spine. Is this fire latent in matter, and it represents the fire of the form aspect, and it's merging with the radiatory fire as it passes up through the Kundalini, because after all, that's the etheric body, and radio fire is what animates all the centers, right? So that actually represents this merging, is this passage of the Kundalini up through to the head center.
Okay, so would it be fair to say that when DK refers to the fire latent in matter, that's the equivalent of Kundalini, or is he referring to something broader?
He's referring to something broader. That's an aspect of it, but every atom of substance has a fire at its center. That's that point of fire that is the life aspect that is inherent in all units of either exhibiting consciousness or potential consciousness, including an atom of substance, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, good. So the point in the center of the circle is one meaning of that is that point of fire at the center of the manifested entity, which is the circle. And that can be an atom of substance or the first logos, the entire whole and anything in between. Anyone else? Any other thoughts? Okay. Could we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Joe, do you want to read?
Okay. Equilibrium in the lower groupings leads to eventual equilibrium in the higher groupings, which include the lower. In this way, the achievement of an equilibrium works from below to above. It is interesting that astrologically, the sun has a certain relationship to Libra, the sign of equilibrium, known as a fall. The sun falls in the Libra for assertive, self-centered solar tendencies are moderated, equilibrated, and decentralized. Under this influence, there arises a tendency toward distribution rather than centralization. It is precisely this distribution which ecologically we are attempting to achieve. Some of this more even distribution will be achieved during the Aquarian age. Aquarius is a sign of distribution, in which the sign Libra, like Aquarius, an air sign, will be strengthened. MDR's commentary.
Thank you, Joe. Well, we miss you, Michael. So we get an astrological perspective here, so valuable. This idea of equilibrizing these two energies, the fire latent and the radiatory fire prana, is represented by Libra. Because Libra is the great sign of equilibration, in the same way that Aries is that fundamental sign of impulse, of the sun in its exalted state, the center of all, you could say. Libra represents this place where the balance that's achieved can then allow for the equilibrizing of all aspects of the consciousness, right? So you don't have this distinction between form and spirit. You have this place of equilibrized, what's the word I want? Equilibrated reality. Equilibrium. You have this place of equilibrium, which then allows for unity to come into being, which is a final condition. Yeah, this is really useful, to get how these, and also the idea that, we don't have to wait a zillion years for this to happen at the end of the entire scheme, that even during the Aquarian age, we will have some of this quality of equilibrized distribution coming to the fore. And that's going to be one of the distinguishing qualities of the age. Okay, any thoughts about this? Okay, next up, when they, the solar planets, attain a mutual balance and interaction, then the system is stabilized and perfection reached. Planetary balance, which MDR points out is achieved through the blending of the two fires in Libra, allows for an unimpeded interplanetary energetic exchange that allows for systemic stabilization, which in turn allows for unity and synthesis. You know, these are conditions that represent the end of the solar system or the end of any schemes, evolution. You could say that the final stage is this point of equilibrium because that sets the conditions for synthesis. Remember, we have the synthesizing planets, right? First, everything is drawn into Saturn, and then from there into Neptune, and from there into Uranus. Finally, the entire system is brought into Uranus, which then is blended with the sun. And that's the end of that solar manifestation, right? So this concept of equilibrium is the state that's achieved, right, for that to happen. Okay. Next up.
Robert's got a question.
Yeah, Robert.
Oh, sorry, Robert.
Robert, what's up?
Yeah, okay. It seems like a possibility here that since prana for the human system, thinking of it as, you know, part of the lowest subplane, there's an analogy here between the blending of the fires of mind and higher consciousness in the Antakarana, given that the prana of the heavenly man or the solar man is of a much higher order. It's not the same prana as a prana in the system of the man, but it would be, if I'm making sense there.
Yeah. And the goal would be to become one with the planetary consciousness and thus participate, you know, in the cosmic etheric ethers rather than the cosmic physical plane etheric ethers, right? And at that point, it's not form aspect prana that is the sustaining element. Then you're actually partaking of a cosmic level of prana. And that, of course, that's the end goal of, you know, that would be monadic consciousness, which exists in those pranas. And that would be your sustaining element at that point. And humanity as a whole, of course, won't reach that until, you know, the last subrace of the last root race of the last globe of the last round of the scheme, right? As a body. But the initiate can accelerate the process and achieve that stage. I would guess we're looking at 7th initiation. You know, of course, it's a gradual shift. And so those in the, you know, starting at the, at the destruction of the causal body and triadal consciousness, you would start to, you could say, be nourished or participate in these higher cosmic etheric ethers.
What's interesting too, in terms of what you're saying, is that prana, you know, which we look at as a etheric or a physical kind of quality in the individual, is actually a quality in consciousness in these higher dimensions. So that prana is actually, while being material, is almost more like a process, you know, depending on where it's being looked at in, you know, in the gradations of the planes, which is interesting.
It is, yeah. Yeah, they're both levels of prana are vitalizing. But consciousness itself is physical in the cosmic physical sense. In other words, that combination which is um, manifests as brain activity and then higher mind and then Buddhic mind, and then finally Atmic, that's still all cosmic physical, you could say it exists within a physical substance, right? And so it's, in a way, you could say you're moving from one level of etheric vitality to the next.
Yeah, but like by the law of correspondences,
Yeah.
So which is it kind of opens up a lot of windows there. Interesting.
Yeah. Thanks, Robert. Anyone else?
I'm here.
Yeah.
Along the same lines, several years ago, an individual and I were speaking, and I mentioned something about feeling comfortable. That's not quite the word I was looking for, but in essence, it was related to equalizing that we're talking about right now. And this person referred me to Robert Aiken, a Zen practitioner that's pretty well known, I think since died. But anyway, she was excited because he had said that this I can't even say the word, equilibrium, a contentment reached was a fairly high sign of spiritual development. And so here I wanted to piggyback onto that story by saying, yeah, we could have lazy equilibrium or contentment, or we need a dynamic.
Yeah, you got a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my point.
Yeah.
And that will take us from stage to stage in the long term.
Yeah. It's, if you're sitting in your lazy boy, armchair with a bowl of chips, watching a program, you're in a kind of equilibrium, but that's probably not what he's talking about here. Yeah, there's a lot of connection with this equilibrium, with the stage of harmony in the fourth ray of harmony through conflict, that you work your way up from the baseline of the equilateral triangle conflict of the pairs of opposites into that harmonious stage. There is something of this essence of equilibrium that's reached in that, right? And it's what happens is you come into a resonant relationship with the quote unquote other, right? The other it's not conflictual. You're in a harmonious relationship. And that's the first stage of blending, because through harmony, through resonance, the blending leading eventually to unity can occur.
I think so. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Great. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, next up, the even distribution of prana will parallel this balancing in the man, in the race, in the planet, and in the system. It's extraordinary that the quote, even distribution of prana stands at the root of such momentous events as race, planetary, and systemic equilibrium. It is a high goal, the goal of the current cycle, and depends on the fusion of latent and radiatory heat at all levels, which is a prerequisite for the further stage of fusing the fire of mind and spirit. But you read a line like the even distribution of prana, and you think, oh yeah, that would be a good idea for health benefit, to have an even. But you realize that it's the first stage in this, what finally ends up as return to the monad, essentially, return to the spirit self, or the true self. Okay, and finally, this is but another way of saying that uniform vibration will be achieved. So, at this point, I hope you now understand something of what is meant by that. In a condition of uniform vibration, all difference has been equilibrated. And thus, at least within the system, there is no other, no otherness, for all is now identified with the one life that permeates the system. I saw Tia's hand go up. Yes, Tia.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I'm in a car actually. I just wanted to say this is really interesting. I was getting back to Robert's point and Joe's point, just trying to put them all together. Is that this is really an examination of relationships and the subjective aspects of prana on a sort of on the cosmic physical plane, and even beyond. It's just amazing to me how complete Master DK's examination of this whole subject is. That was my comment, because it really is the nature of prana itself that we're looking at, talking about water and fire, and how that relationship with all the three fires enables it to manifest in so many different worlds and on so many different levels, to the point where this equilibrium exists and we actually have a whole nother scheme. It's just amazing.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, relationship is, and the term, relationship and equilibrium are very much connected. Equilibrium is a high stage of relationship, all right? You can come into relationship without there being any harmony whatsoever. You're just, there is yourself and there's the other, or there's just two elements. But as they continue to interrelate, then the harmony eventually becomes a guiding principle. And equilibrium is the final stage of that, of the relationship, you could say, yeah, it's funny. There was a couple, both of them were 102 years old, and somebody asked them, well, what's the secret to your relationship? And they said, well, we learn to be nice to each other. And I thought that was great. It seems so humble, so simple, but that's what it took to, they'd been together something like 80 years or something. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Kira.
Okay. Microcosmic organic disorders. They're basically two in number. Troubles due to congestion, destructions of tissues due to overabsorption of prana, or its too rapid blending with latent physical fire. We have a curious illustration of both of these forms of trouble in sunstroke and in heat stroke. Though supposedly understood by physicians, they are nevertheless altogether etheric disorders. When the nature of the etheric body is better understood and its wise care followed, both these types of disease will be prevented. They are due to solar pranic emanation. In one case, the effect of the emanation is to bring about death or serious illness through the congestion of an etheric channel, while in the other, the same result is brought about by destruction of etheric matter.
Thank you. Okay, first up, the headache. Microcosmic organic disorders. This is the second in a series of 3 microcosmic disorders, meaning applying to a human being, right? The next These are basically two in number: troubles due to congestion and destruction of tissue due to overabsorption of prana or its too rapid blending with the latent physical fire. We just covered this disorder from a different angle back on page 107. Quote, the etheric body receives prana or solar rays too rapidly, passes it through and out of the system with too much force, and this leaves the victim a prey to inertia or devitalization. You may remember the analogy of a tennis racket with loose strings, right, that he gave. So to this, DK now adds, quote, a too rapid blending with latent physical fire, which is the fire inherent in the physical body. Remember that when conditions are optimal, prana, quote, holds the body in a vitalized condition by imposing upon the matter of the body a certain rate of vibratory action. So we might surmise that the too rapid a blending with latent physical fire happens when this certain rate of vibratory action is exceeded. Okay, up next, let's take this section on sunstroke and heat stroke as a whole. I'll just read it over. We have a curious illustration of both these forms of trouble in sunstroke and in heat stroke. Though supposedly understood by physicians, they are nevertheless altogether etheric disorders. When the nature of the etheric body is better understood and its wise care followed, both these types of diseases will be prevented. They are due to solar pranic emanation. In one case, the effect of the emanation is to bring about death or serious illness through the congestion of an etheric channel, while in the other, the same result is brought about by destruction of etheric matter. Okay, so in modern medicine, sunstroke and heat stroke are seen as the same condition. Nobody that I could find separates these conditions. WebMD's article on the subject, which is similar to many other descriptions that I found, says heat stroke results from prolonged exposure to high temperatures, usually in combination with dehydration, which leads to failure of the body's temperature control system. This medical definition of heat stroke is a core body temperature of greater than 104 degrees Fahrenheit, with complications involving the central nervous system that occur after exposure to higher temperatures. So obviously this is all purely dense physical understanding, whereas with DK, we have a clear distinction between sunstroke and heat stroke, telling us that one leads to, quote, congestion of an etheric channel, and the other to destruction of etheric matter. If I was to hazard a guess as to how a breakdown in the distribution of prana is responsible for heat stroke, I would guess that the pranic triangle's ability to regulate the vibratory rate of reception of prana breaks down, and thus the body's ability to repel excessive heat is defeated. This is, of course, just a guess, but I also imagine that there are yogic means by which you could control and strengthen this pranic triangle's ability to function even in the presence of, excessive heat. There are probably yogic means by which you could do this. Okay, next up, could we get a reader, please?
Kirsten.
The above illustration has been used with definite intent, but it should be pointed out that etheric congestion may lead to many forms of disease and of mental incompetence. Etheric congestion leads to the thickening of the web to an abnormal extent, and this thickening may prevent, for instance, contact with the higher self or principles and its resultants. Idiocy, is it called so?
Idiocy. Means
Idiocy and mental unbalance. It may lead to abnormal fleshy development, to the thickening of some internal organ and consequent undue pressure. One portion of the etheric body being congested may lead to the entire physical condition being upset and resulting in diverse complaints.
Thank you. So first, the above illustration has been used with definite intent, but it should be pointed out that etheric congestion may lead to many forms of disease and mental incompetence. Okay, because etheric congestion comes through heat stroke, we might assume that it represents a dangerous overabundance of prana that somehow creates an energetic obstruction. DK doesn't go into further detail, but it might also damage the etheric body in such a way that the free flow of prana is inhibited, which we here learned can lead to disease and even mental problems. This underscores the critical role prana plays in our overall health. Next, etheric congestion leads to the thickening of the web to an abnormal extent. And this thickening may prevent, for instance, contact with the higher self or principles and its resultants, quote, idiocy and mental imbalance. This shows how essential the connection with the higher self truly is, suggesting that its presence is necessary even for normal mental functioning, because he says without it, it can result, if you break this contact with the higher self, it can result in idiocy and mental imbalance. So, even for those who are not consciously aware and connected with the higher self, it is functioning in order to keep one, you could say, sane and normal. So this suggests that its presence is, thickening of the web underscores the distinction between the etheric body and the prana that it channels, right? They're two different things. Thickening of the etheric body is the physical device by which prana is received, and is thickening. It suggests that impedes the flow of prana through the etheric body. It's really extraordinary ideas here. Let's continue. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Ariane.
Destruction of tissue may lead to insanity of many kinds, especially those kinds deemed incurable. The burning of the web may let in extraneous astral currents, against which man is helpless. The brain tissue may be literally destroyed by this pressure, and serious trouble be caused through the etheric ring path not having been destroyed in some one place.
Thank you. It's startling to learn that the etheric web can be damaged or even destroyed, not only through inappropriate yoga practices like the breath of fire, but also through something as physical as heat stroke. In a treatise on white magic, DK says, another and rather potent danger is the result, literally, of the bringing together of the land and water. We were talking about that earlier in terms of fire and water. It demonstrates as the pouring into the brain consciousness, the land aspect, of the knowledges of the astral plane. This occurs when the protective web that separates the etheric from the astral is damaged. Any thoughts about this? Okay, next up. Oh, I see Robert's hand. Yeah, Robert.
Hi. What's interesting here is it's talking about how you can suffer ills through the thickening of the web, and in this case, the thinning of the web. Okay, so the web has to be kept in a balanced, healthy condition, and of course, who knows how to do that? But that's what esoteric medicine would be about on some level in terms of the physical.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I mean, there's the obvious, you know, stay out of the sun kind of teaching, but then there's a whole other level to this, isn't there? You know,
I actually had a heat stroke in Europe one summer when the heat was unbelievable. And the feeling was, and of course I didn't have any idea what was going on, but I could not get cool. It was as if I was swimming in this heat. You know, I couldn't fix my body. It was a place where there were no fans or a lot of water, but I was flooded with, and obviously unable to, you know, to kind of bring my body back to a condition, which is why now I have so much brain damage in dealing with the Bailey book.
you know, we work with you on that. With
and I appreciate it. You know, you're a real web healer. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I had a heat stroke when visiting the Black. See, no, wait a minute. Is that it? Not the Black Sea. The what's the one in Israel? The Dead Sea. Right. And, you know, I almost took on the namesake because I woke up in a local hospital tent. Evidently, there are so many people who just walk around and suddenly they don't even know. I had no idea, but suddenly I was in this tent with heat stroke, you know, and it didn't even seem like I was in that much duress until I woke up in this tent. So yeah, it can hit you very unexpectedly. Okay, can we get a reader, please?
Janet.
In connection with the planet, a similar state of affairs may be found. Later information, can you hear me?
Yes, you're great.
I wasn't able to test.
Later information.
Okay, with the planet, a similar state of affairs may be found. Later information may be forthcoming, which is at present withheld. This will show that whole races have been influenced, and in certain kingdoms of nature, troubled by planetary etheric congestion or the destruction of planetary etheric tissue. We have dealt with the functional and organic ills of the etheric, giving certain indicators of the extension of the concept to other realms than the purely human. In the human kingdom lies the key, but the turning of that key opens up a door to a wider interpretation as it admits one into the mysteries of nature. Though that key has to be turned 7 times. Yet even one turn reveals untold avenues of eventual comprehension.
Thank you, Janet. Okay, first, a statement that extends the problem of etheric congestion and the destruction of etheric tissue to planetary levels, and even to the point that, quote, whole races have been influenced and certain kingdoms of nature troubled. This is extraordinary teaching. MDR notes, we do know of astrally obsessed groups. The German people, for instance, with its vulnerable Pisces personality, may have been one such group during the Second World War. This follows on the idea that harmful astral currents can be let in through a destruction of planetary etheric tissue. The destruction of planetary etheric tissue may have also been in part responsible for the penetration of the psyches of the last subrace of Atlantis, thereby allowing the dark forces to have such a devastating and far-reaching influence. Next, a somewhat cryptic statement suggesting that though the problem of etheric congestion and the destruction of etheric tissue exists on other levels, that the key to understanding these problems lies in the human kingdom, and that the turning of this key admits one into the mysteries of nature. Okay, so we're going to be turning a corner and going down another avenue here for a while. Those of you who were with us during the last Secret Doctrine webinar will recognize the idea of turning the key 7 times. Each turn of this, or any occult key, describing down here, takes one into deeper causal awareness of whatever mystery is being revealed. Thus, each turn requires not only more information, but also a higher level of consciousness in order to comprehend that which is being revealed. Since this represents a vertical ascent, occult philosophy is the only science that provides these keys. Doesn't he say that here somewhere? No matter what the subject, usually only the first turn of the key is given to the general public. I would say always only the first turn. The rest are progressive secrets of initiation. That being said, there are also keys revealed through different disciplines, which include, as indicated in this extensive footnote, which is where we're at. You can see down here at the bottom, the beginning of this footnote, and it continues on the next page. Which, you know, it shows us in this diverse range of subjects in which these keys exist. And Michael Robbins took the time to consider each of these keys. So let's take a read. Could we get a reader, please, for this?
Mesa.
Psychological. Dealing with the qualitative relationship between earthly, systemic, and cosmic entities, and the means by which they know each other. Astronomical. Dealing with the cycles and physical interplay of the major, for us, planets, stars, and constellations. Physical or physiological, revealing the reflection in matter of archetypal patterns and the secret powers contained within the physical mechanism. Metaphysical, dealing with the philosophical understanding of all earthly, systemic, and cosmic relations and the divine creative process. The universe is considered as will and idea. Anthropological, dealing with the formal, physiological, psychological, and spiritual aspects of the various races of human beings and the manner in which these races developmentally reveal the intended unfoldments of the divine plan in relation to Earth. Astrological, dealing with the qualities of the major, for us, planets, stars, and constellations, their qualitative interplay, and the physical, psychological, and spiritual meaning of their cycles. Geometrical, revealing the manner in which the grand geometrician geometrizes, oh my gosh, in both matter and form. Mystical, dealing with the experienced fusion or union of cosmic entities with the entities which include them, man in relation to the soul in relation to the monad in relation to the planetary logos, etc. Symbolical, dealing with the manner in which the greatest truths are not literally conveyed, but symbolically represented. Numerical, dealing with the divine numerology on the principle of which all things are built and organized, since the primary entities in cosmos are numbers.
Thank you. That was quite a reading, huh?
My tongue almost didn't want to.
Keep going, huh? Yeah, well, maybe I should have divided it in half. There was a lot of material there. Okay, so you'll notice that there are 10 subjects or keys here listed, not 7. And I can't help but think that each of these subjects has 7 vertical levels dependent for comprehension on the level of one's consciousness. For example, MDR tells us that the astronomical key deals with the cycles and physical interplay of the planets, stars, and constellations. But possibly the next turn of the key might reveal these heavenly men in a more fundamental interaction, one unencumbered by time and space, perhaps revealing a vision of how they relate through sound, for instance. Right, just an idea, but it gives you a sense, and we could do that with each one of these to take them to imagine our way into the next key. That doesn't mean it's the truth, but you can at least get a sense of how there could be layered levels of understanding. Okay. So, yes, Robert.
What was the heading of Michael's list? What was he saying that those descriptions were?
I don't know.
Okay, so he's kind of trying to assess rationally what they might be. Okay, well, what's really interesting.
Well, the heading is this footnote. So you have this footnote, right? And so what he's doing, the keys as hinted by HPB are, and he gives you this list. These are the ones he tackles. So that's his motivation for that list.
Okay, so then if you look at, we can stay on this list, or either one, it doesn't matter. The DK turns the key for us on some of these subjects.
That's right.
Especially in the books on the rays, but in all the books, okay? And turning the key, like for A, psychological, turning the key on the psychological might have meant writing Esoteric Psychology 1 and 2. It's not like just one little piece of information. So,
absolutely.
Right. So it becomes like a multi-dimensional lock that gets unlocked. Very good. It's amazing to think of the extent of any of these keys, as opposed to, my first thought is, okay, there's a mystery, you turn the key, you understand something, but in fact, what you're presented with is something so much beyond just a simple or even a primal truth.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm really glad you said that. It's, we have whole books, esoteric astrology, DK's esoteric astrology, gives us a sense of the astrological key. It's probably not the complete first astrological key, but, at least from his point of view, it was enough of a revelation to indicate nature of that key, you know. And you could say that you're absolutely right. You could go through all of these and find DK teachings that would reveal, you know, and also SD, you know, for instance, the secret doctrine deals a lot with the anthropological, you know, the whole latter half of the stanzas it's on deals with the root races and the coming into form and where they come from and why and what the end result is of that. So, yeah, you know, theosophy in general is a revelation of the keys. But just to a certain extent, and you know, we're about to find out because we're going to be going through a lot of the secret doctrines references on these keys, how little can really be revealed. And it's not because, I mean, in some cases, it's a secret of initiation, and therefore can't be revealed. But most of the time, it's self-guarded by the fact that they can't be understood until a certain level of consciousness is achieved. Anyone else? Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at the footnote itself, which is so extensive that DK has actually titled this footnote, quote, "The Keys to the Secret Doctrine" by H.P. Blavatsky. When I first saw that, I went looking. I thought maybe there was a publication, but then I realized he's actually titling the whole footnote, which is what everything in this footnote is about. It's Keys to the Secret Doctrine. So there's a lot of worthwhile material to be considered here. But in order to keep from spending 2 or 3 webinars on this one extended footnote, we won't be examining each quote line by line as we do with the TCF text. Of course, you know, you can always ask questions or make comments at any time, but we won't be going line by line through it. Okay, so settle in because we're going to be here for a little while, certainly the rest of this webinar on this, just the material from this footnote. First, a passage on the 7 keys in reference to the mystery of Genesis, of the Genesis of man. Could we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Miri.
Shall one, for fear of incurring the penalty of being called a superstitious fool, or even a liar, abstain from furnishing proofs as good as any, only because that day, when all the 7 keys shall be delivered unto science, or rather the man of learning and research in the symbolic department has not yet done? In the face of the crushing discoveries of geology and anthropology with regard to the antiquity of man, shall we, in order to avoid the usual penalty that awaits every one who strays outside the beaten paths of either theology or materialism, hold to the 6,000 years of special creation, or accept in submissive admiration our genealogy and descent from the ape? Not so. As long as it is known that the secret records hold the said 7 keys to the mystery of the genesis of man.
Thank you. So all these quotes are from the Secret Doctrine. Next, a passage on the 7 levels of meaning associated with the myth of Prometheus. A reader, please.
Yeah, Jane, I don't know if you opened your mic because you wanted to read.
Yeah. The first boon Prometheus gave to mortals, as he tells the chorus, was to hinder them from foreseeing death. He saved the mortal race from sinking down to Hades' gloom, and then only, besides that, he gave them fire. This shows plainly the dual character, at any rate, of the Promethean myth, if Orientalists will not accept the existence of the 7 keys taught in occultism. This relates to the first opening of man's spiritual perceptions, not to his first seeing or discovering fire. For fire was never discovered, but existed on earth since its beginning.
Yeah, any thoughts or questions about this? Okay. We're getting just, little hints of how these 7 keys apply as we go through. Okay, so next up, 2 perspectives on a verse from Exodus. Can we get a reader, please?
Robert.
It has been repeatedly stated in this work that every religious and philosophical symbol had 7 meanings attached to it, each pertaining to its legitimate plane of thought, i.e. either purely metaphysical or astronomical, psychic or physiological, etc., etc. These 7 meanings and their applications are hard enough to learn when taken by themselves, but the interpretation and the right comprehension of them become tenfold more puzzling when, instead of being correlated or made to flow consecutively out of and to follow each other, each or any one of these meanings is accepted as the one and sole explanation of the whole symbolical idea. An instance may be given as it admirably illustrates the statement. Here are 2 interpretations given by 2 learned Kabbalists and scholars of one and the same verse in Exodus 33:18-23. Moses beseeches the Lord to show him his glory. Evidently, it is not the crude dead letter phraseology as found in the Bible that is to be accepted. There are 7 meanings in the Kabbalah, of which we may give 2 as interpreted by the said 2 scholars. One of them quotes while explaining, "Thou canst not see my face. I will put thee in the cleft of the rock, cover thee with my hand while I pass by, and then I will take away mine hand, and thou shalt see my ahur, my back, i.e. my visible universe, my lower manifestations. But as a man still in the flesh, thou canst not see my invisible nature." So proceeds the Kabbalah. This is correct, and is the cosmo-metaphysical explanation, and now speaks the other Kabbalists, giving the numerical meaning, as it involves a good many suggestive ideas and is far more fully given, we may allow it more space.
Okay, this follows about 3 pages of the numerological meaning, and so I didn't include it here because we're just getting a taste of more about the 7 keys than about the specific subject matter that we're going to. I actually regretted not being able to include it, but it was just too much. But you get a sense of the inner understanding of this outer idea. For instance, here it says, beseeches Lord to show him his glory. Moses beseeches Lord to show him his glory, and that the Lord shows him his back, meaning his manifested self, but whereas his invisible self can never be seen by one in form. I saw a hand go up there. Who was that?
It's Joe.
Hi, Joe. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about meditating about an issue. And I wonder if DK is trying to suggest that if we're really serious about a project, we should address it from all 7 keys.
Or you'll never do that. You can't. In fact, what you're aiming for is to get a further understanding of the first key, because the outer dead letter, the exoteric, is not even a key. That outer information is not a key. the first key reveals something further, right? And so, for instance, in meditation, you would ponder in order to unveil a hidden meaning available to you at your level of consciousness. And this is probably going to be in the nature of the first key, right? Always recommended, though, isn't it? I mean, that's that's how we get to meaning.
Well, if it's okay, I'll pursue that a little bit. I work with the fifth meditation a great deal the last couple of years. And really, the instructions are today you get to look at attachment. And don't worry about it being a different idea, a different symbol that comes to you on different days, because hopefully you're beginning to get some inspirations other than the very basic one, for example.
All right. Yeah, so in the same way that the entire book of esoteric astrology reveals the first key, all your many meditations on attachment, readings on attachment would reveal that first key about it, and you would have a deep understanding. But the next key
I got it. Yeah.
would not be available until your consciousness had progressed to the point that that further revelation was possible. Now, you can't codify that. You can't say, well, at the second initiation, the second revelation, who knows how all that works. But just to get this basic concept of how much is hidden, and how little is actually revealed about any of these fundamental concepts. Thanks, Joe.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, I see hands raised. Michael?
Okay, a couple of quick things here. I may be screwing up the order, but Jesus says, "I'm the way, the truth, and the light." I think that individuals are the keys too. That a teacher, because if I'm standing in front of a locked door, I'm not going to use my psychic power. I'm going to need that key, which I may have earned somehow, but I have to be given the key. And we've talked about the books, the teachings of the temple, that were very powerful theosophical thing in the early part of the 20th century. On the very frontispiece of that book, which is written by Hilarion, one of the other masters, it says, "Behold, I have given you a key," which is just, it's fascinating that these books are for us the way we can handle whatever degree of key we're able to take in at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Anyone else? Mikhail, are you there? Okay.
Yeah, I'm still here. There's no other hands raised.
Okay, I just saw two hands go up, but I guess
it was Joe and Robert.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. All right. So next up, a quote from the introduction to the third volume of The Secret Doctrine, which is what, by the way, DK chose the 3-volume set to quote from. So can we get a reader, please?
And Veronica.
And Veronica, are you there? Okay, she might have had to step out for a minute. Someone else?
Yep. Next is Micah.
One of the main points in this volume is to indicate in the works of the old Aryan, Greek, and other philosophers of note, as well as in all the world scriptures, the presence of a strong esoteric allegory and symbolism. Another of the objects is to prove that the key of interpretation as furnished by the Eastern Hindu Buddhistic canon of occultism, fitting as well as the I'm sorry, my eyes don't do well this evening, as well the Christian Gospels as it does archaic Egyptian, Greek, Chaldean, Persian, and even Hebrew mosaic books, must have been one common to all the nations, however divergent may have been their respective methods and exoteric blinds.
Okay, so what he's saying here is that another of the objects is to prove that the key of interpretation, which is relevant to all these disciplines, right? All that he lists here, was common to all the nations, no matter how many, no matter how the language is couched, no matter how many blinds are put in the way of this understanding, that nonetheless that it's a common key among all these, right? That's the point made here. Okay, let's see. Next up, a passage on the mystery of the fallen angels. Can we get a reader?
Yeah, I wonder, and Veronica, are you back?
No, huh?
Nope. So to there's Janet.
What is the absolute and complete truth as well as esoteric meaning about this universal myth of spirits peopling the earth, fallen angels? The whole essence of truth cannot be transmitted from the mouth to ear, nor can any pen describe it, not even that of the recording angel, unless man finds the answer in the sanctuary of his own heart, in the innermost depths of his divine intuition. It is the great seventh mystery of creation, the first and the last, and those who read St. John's Apocalypse may find its shadow lurking under the seventh seal. It can be represented only in its apparent objective form, like the eternal riddle of the Sphinx. If the latter threw herself into the sea and perished, it is not because of Oedipus had unriddled the secret of the ages, but because of by anthropomorphizing the ever spiritual and objective, he had dishonored the great truth forever. Therefore, we can give it only from a philosophical and intellectual plane, unlocked with 3 keys respectively. The last 4 keys of the 7 that throw wide open the portals of the mysteries of nature are in the hands of the highest initiates and cannot be divulged to the masses at large, not in this, our century, at any rate.
Okay, thank you. Any thoughts or questions about this? So she's got a little tongue in cheek going on here. Yeah, did you see that?
Yeah, I did. I was just laughing, kind of.
Yeah. You see, little tongue in cheek, you have to look for HPB's embedding some humor in her stuff. She's saying, so, what happened was Oedipus came along. This is what he's famous for. one of the things anyway. He came along and he had to, he was met by the Sphinx on the road to Thebes, and the Sphinx, asked, "What is the riddle? What is the riddle of the Sphinx?" And if you don't answer it right, she kills you, throws you into the ocean. And so Oedipus answered it, but he answered it in a very exoteric way. The riddle was, what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs during the day, and 3 legs in the evening? And then Oedipus answers, man. And then he explained it by saying he's crawling in the morning on 4, he walks upright on 2, and then he walks with a cane in the evening. But this is a very exoteric answer. It's not the true answer. But so what he's saying here is that she actually threw herself into the sea because Oedipus dishonored the great truth forever by answering in this exoteric way. The true answer is actually, if you want to know the true answer, tune into the next Secret Teachings of All Ages, because there's a synchronicity here. We're actually going to be dealing with the Sphinx and this and this riddle of the Sphinx in the next episode of that webinar. Anyway, so and she also indicates here the idea of vertical keys, right? Not just the horizontal keys by subject, but she can reveal 3 keys here, but the last 4 are in the hands of the highest initiates, right? Okay. Next, a passage on the mathematical key. Can we get a reader, please?
Yep. Joe.
Nevertheless, the 3 figures, 3, 6, 5, or the number of days in a solar year, have but to be read with the Pythagorean key to find in them a highly philosophical and moral meaning. One instance will be sufficient. It can read, the earth, 3, animated by 6, the spirit of life, 5. Simply because 3 is equivalent to the Greek gamma, which letter is the symbol of Gaia, the earth, while the figure 6 is the symbol of the animating or informing principle, and the 5 is the universal quintessence which spreads in every direction and forms all matter. The few instances and examples brought forward reveal only one small portion of the methods used to read the symbolical ideographs and numerals of antiquity, the system being of an extreme and complex difficulty. Very few, even among the initiates, could master all the 7 keys. Is it to be wondered then that the metaphysical gradually dwindled down into the physical nature?
Thank you, Joe. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I could talk more about this, but so 3 is, that's the fundamental form aspect. If you think of, and this is where knowing parallel keys, on a more horizontal level, that the symbol for 6 is the 6-pointed star, which is an upward pointed triangle overlaid on a downward pointing triangle, right? And therefore is the symbol of the animating or informing principle, because you achieve this animation through this equality of the up and downward triangles, right? The form aspect and the spirit aspect in equal representation. And then the 5 is the universal quintessence, which spreads in every direction, because through 5, you get the golden means, the 1.618 mathematical, which you find in all manifested nature, you know, and from a sunflower to the proportions in a human body, all represents as 5. So that's just to show you, and you know, one more page turned just on this, right? Okay. Next, a quote from the final page of volume 2 of The Secret Doctrine. Can we get a reader, please?
Kira.
No human-born doctrine, no creed, however, sanctioned by customs and antiquity, can compare in sacredness with the religion of nature. The key of wisdom that unlocks the massive gates leading to the arcana of the innermost sanctuaries can be found hidden in her bosom only.
Thank you. And another reference to the large entrance door to the mysteries. Can we get a reader? I know we're going through readers one after another, aren't we? Mikhail, are you there?
Yeah. Do we need another reader?
Yeah.
Kirsten.
As our correspondent says, it becomes more convincing to me every day that in a far past time, there was a mighty civilization with enormous learning, which had a common language of the earth, as to which its essence can be recovered from the fragments which now exist. There existed indeed a mighty civilization, and a still mightier secret learning and knowledge, the entire scope of which can never be discovered by geometry and the Kabbalah alone. For there are 7 keys to the large entrance door, and not one, nor even 2 keys can ever open it sufficiently to allow more than glimpses of what lies within.
Thank you. Okay, next. The 7 keys in relation to the 7 root races. Can we get a reader, please?
Marianne.
But this does not prevent truth and fact appearing at the foundation at these vagaries, which the author has never dared to sign with his own or even a borrowed name. For his pre-Adamic races, not satanic, but simply Atlantic, and the Hermaphrodites before the latter, and mentioned in the Bible when read esoterically as they are in the Secret Doctrine. The 7 keys open the mysteries, past and future, of the 7 great root races, as of the 7 kalpas. Though the genesis of man and even the esoteric geology will surely be rejected by science, just as much as the satanic and pre-Adamic races. Yet, if having no other way out of their difficulties, the scientists have to choose between the 2, we feel certain that Scripture, notwithstanding, once the mystery language is approximately mastered, it is the archaic teaching that will be accepted.
Okay, thank you. And next, a passage on the relationship between the Great Bear and the 7 souls of man. Can we get a reader, please?
Miri.
Yes. The first form of the mystical 7 was seen to be figured in heaven by the 7 large stars of the Great Bear, the constellation assigned by the Egyptians to the mother of time and of the 7 elemental powers. Just so for the Hindus place in the Great Bear their 7 primitive rishis and call these constellations the abode of the Saptarishi, Riksha, and Shitraka. Shitra, Shikandinas. But whether it is only an astronomical myth or a primordial mystery, having a deeper meaning than it bears on its surface, is what their adepts claim to know. We are also told that the Egyptians divided the face of the sky by night into 7 parts. The primary heaven was 7-fold. So it was with the Aryans. One has but to read the Puranas about the beginnings of Brahma and his egg to see it. Have the Aryans taken the idea from the Egyptians? The earliest forces precedes the lecture, recognized in nature, were reckoned as 7 in number. These became 7 elementals, devils, or later divinities. 7 properties were assigned to nature as matter, cohesion, fluxion, coagulation, accumulation, station, and division, and 7 elements or souls to man. All this was taught in the esoteric doctrine, but it was interpreted and its mysteries unlocked, as already stated, with 7, not 2, or at the utmost 3 keys. Hence, the causes of their effects worked in invisible or mystical, as well as psychic nature, and were made referable to metaphysics and psychology as much as to physiology. The principle of 70, as the author says, was introduced, and the number 7 supplied a sacred type that could be used for manifold purposes. And it was so used. For the 7 souls of the pharaoh, and often mentioned in the Egyptian texts, 7 souls or principles in man were identified by our British Druids. The rabbins also ran the number of souls up to 7. So likewise do the Karens of India.
Thank you. By the way, the quotes are from a lecture that Joe Massey gave called The 7 Souls of Man. Yeah, it's so tempting to, this is an example where I could spend probably 30 minutes plus analyzing what he says here. But that's not really the point of these many footnote references. It's to give you an overall view of this idea of the 7 keys, and in this case, for instance, not 2 or at the utmost 3 keys, right, which would allow you to a greater understanding. So we'll just keep going. Next, a brief comment on the 7 keys in relation to symbols. Can we get a reader?
Lisa.
The teaching is offered as it is understood, and as there are 7 keys of interpretation to every symbol and allegory, that which may not fit a meaning, say from the psychological or astronomical aspect, will be found quite correct from the physical or metaphysical.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot in this little bit. It's interpretation is true relative to which subject you're applying it to, right? So whereas it might not be relevant, particular interpretation to the psychological or astronomical aspect or key, it will be found to be correct, in this case, to the physical or metaphysical. So it's the aligning of the two streams, right? The interpretive stream and the subject at which it applies to, not to mention the vertical stream, which would be based on the consciousness. Okay, next, a description of the keys by subject. Can we get a reader, please?
And Robert.
As truly stated by Ragon, the ancient Hierophants have combined so cleverly the dogmas and symbols of their religious philosophy that these symbols can be fully explained only by the combination and knowledge of all the keys. They can be only approximately interpreted, even if one finds out 3 out of these 7 systems: the anthropological, the psychic, and the astronomical. The 2 chief interpretations, the highest and the lowest, the spiritual and the physiological, they preserved in the greatest secrecy until the latter fell into the dominion of the profane. Thus far, with regard only to the prehistoric Hierophants, with whom that which has now become purely or impurely phallic was a science as profound and as mysterious as biology and physiology are now. This was their exclusive property, the fruit of their studies and discoveries. The other 2 were those which dealt with the creative gods, theogony, and with creative man, i.e. the ideal and the practical mysteries. I'm sorry for the ringing thing. These interpretations were so cleverly veiled and combined that many were those who, while arriving at the discovery of one meaning, were baffled in understanding the significance of the others. The highest, the first, and the fourth, theogony in relation to anthropogony, were almost impossible to fathom.
So, versed in one particular subject, an interpretation would make a lot of sense, to a particular hierophant, but that another mystery was baffling because it was the interpretation came necessarily through another discipline of which they weren't versed at. So, that's just, he's giving some examples of that here. Thank you, Robert. Okay, next, a description of what happens when the keys are ignored or misinterpreted. And this will be our last one for today. We have just a few more, and then we'll be out of the woods on this.
Okay, let's cycle back, see if Anne Veronica came back. Anne Veronica.
No, it looks like she bailed on us for this session.
Good gravy. Okay. Heike.
The Jews, however, although they borrowed from the older nations the groundwork on which to build their revelation, never had more than 3 keys out of the 7 in their mind while composing their national allegories. The astronomical, the numerical, metrology, and above all, the purely anthropological, or rather physiological key. This resulted in the most phallic religion of all and has now passed part and parcel into Christian theology. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. Every one of these deserves more exploration, but that's just not where we are right now. Okay, next, a passage contrasting occult symbolism and theology. You know what? We'll stop here. It's 45 minutes after the hour. So we have another Treatise on Cosmic Fire webinar next week, next Friday. So I hope you all can join us for that.